Technology Lessons by Joan Zealey of Balgownie, 2519. Narrated by Janine Penfold. I didn't understand my grandmother's reluctance to use electricity. No fridge, no vacuum cleaner, no washing machine, no phone, nor TV. After all, I have a photo of my grandfather in 1904 when he was 20, a handsome man with one finger on the key of his telegraphy machine. Excepting 2 years when he was drafted into the Royal Engineers during the First World War, he spent his entire career in the post office in Dundee, Scotland. His son, my father, left school in 1933 at the height of the Depression. Through his work, Grandpa had heard of an opening for a trainee telephone engineer, and my dad never looked back. He qualified as an electrical engineer, which makes my granny's reluctance more extraordinary. In the Second World War, Dad was refused permission to enlist. Instead, he was one of the people who kept the telephone lines running to Scapa Flow and then Portsmouth for the Navy. He settled in Edinburgh, married, and I was born in 1950. We had a telephone and a car as a consequence of Dad's work, when most of my friends did not. Mum never learned to drive. To her generation, cars were part of a man's world, and she and her children travelled on foot or by bus. With changing 1960s attitudes, I earned my driving licence at age 17. When my 7-year-old daughter came home in tears because the boys insisted that her prized toy car was a boy's toy, I remember asking, "Well, who drives you to dancing? Who drives them to sport?" Male chauvinism has been in steady retreat during my lifetime, even if pockets of resistance exist. Dad was quick to purchase a TV, black and white of course, with very limited broadcasts. My mother preferred the radio. I can remember her bending over it intently, listening to reports of the unfolding Suez crisis. Dad taught radio at night school, but his radios were cabinet-sized things full of large valves. When in the late 1950s, transistors shrank radios dramatically, Dad gave up teaching, unwilling to retrain. A first lesson in the march of technology and the challenges in its wake. Dad always had a camera. He took many black and white photos, graduating to colour in the 1960s. I was given my first camera when I was 16 and took slides of trips to Germany and the USA. We photographed our kids in the 80s in black and white and colour, but when it came to digital photography or photography on the phone, my enthusiasm waned. My daughters store thousands of photos on their computers, but I find this documenting of the minutiae of their lives overwhelming. With slides, you had to weigh the value of each photo carefully. But too often now, photos are taken willy-nilly, the poor, unfocused, ugly ones stored for posterity along with those worth keeping. I didn't really understand my granny's electricity phobia until the 1990s. I returned to work after an extended break to travel the world and raise children. Suddenly, I was confronted with a personal computer. When I left my employment before emigrating to Australia, computers were huge machines occupying a climate-controlled room and tended by specialist senior technicians. Occasionally, I was permitted to enter data into a terminal of this invisible behemoth, and a day or so later, my results would be returned. But the box on my desktop was infinitely more powerful than the computers of 15 years before. It rendered my familiar typewriter obsolete, and it could perform all sorts of other tricks. It was horrible. Early on, I naively searched for the Young Cherry Festival and was shocked that Young Cherry returned 2 pages of porn sites. My children took to computers like ducks to water, playing complex games and writing school assignments. They never had hesitations about using email or Facebook, or downloading photos to the cloud. Of course, I use these facilities, but always with reservations. My grandchildren regard anyone who admits to being born before personal computers as being definitely in the dark ages. Their tiny devices stream movies, play music, and Google anything they want to research. Why learn from a teacher or a book when you can watch YouTube? Telephones, too, have changed from the black phone tethered to a copper cable of my father's day. I remember watching Telstar, an extra star floating across Orion's belt in the 1960s. Yet, when we came to Australia in the 1970s, making a telephone call back to anxious family in the UK was a complex and expensive business. I was the first person in my family to get a mobile phone, a heavy brick, which nonetheless gave me a sense of security as I travelled to work in Western Sydney. I had set off from home in a dark dawn and inadvertently left my lights on all day, with a consequent flat battery. My mother, hearing of plans to develop video phones, responded with alarm that she might be having a shower when the phone rang. Now, we are happy that video calls enable us to meet our new granddaughter in Perth. New technology has its compensations. My children and grandchildren have only seen a non-mobile phone in our house. I expect a phone to be a phone. They are happy with apps, photos, QR codes, maps, and using their phone as an extension of their computer. My father would have been delighted, but totally confused. I find it difficult to come to grips with this new world, where you order online rather than going to the shop, where complex adventure games with brilliant graphics take the place of novels, where you stream content at will rather than consulting the TV guide. So, I understand that we need new generations who accept as normal what we oldies see as revolutionary. Human progress depends on it. The end.